The rain had been falling nonstop since morning, a cold, relentless curtain beating against the windows as Phoenix stood frozen in the living room, her 6-year-old daughter Lily clinging to her leg. Her husband Mark stood across from her, a suitcase already in his hands, and fury etched across his face. "Pack up your things," he snapped. "Take Lily and go stay at your mother's. Emily and the kids are coming here for a while." Phoenix blinked, confused. "What are you talking about?" Her voice cracked. "This is our home. You want me and Lily to leave so your ex-wife can move in." Mark tossed the suitcase to the floor without looking at her. "Emily's in trouble. She needs a place to stay." "It is not a big deal. It is temporary. Not a big deal." The words hit harder than any shout could have. Phoenix bent to pick up the suitcase with shaking hands, not because she agreed, but because she was in shock. Her heart pounded her brain, trying to make sense of what was happening. Lily whimpered, tugging at her sleeve. "Mommy, why is Daddy so mad?" Phoenix had no answer. Mark was moving through the house like a storm, yanking clothes from drawers, avoiding eye contact, stuffing things carelessly into bags. Something was wrong, deeply wrong, and it was not just about Emily. Mark was too angry, too nervous. Phoenix could see it in his eyes, the tightness in his jaw. And just when she felt her knees might give out, the front door creaked open. Two figures stepped into the house, soaked from the storm, her brother Daniel and his friend Ryan. Their eyes scanned the room, locking onto Mark. "What the hell is going on?" Daniel asked, his voice low and firm. Mark turned, startled, clearly not expecting anyone. The room felt like it shrank. The air thickened. Daniel stepped forward, fists clenched, his expression dark. Phoenix's pulse quickened. Whatever was happening, it was no longer just a family argument. Something far worse was lurking beneath the surface, and it was about to come to light. Phoenix stood frozen as Mark shoved the suitcase toward her again, his voice sharper now, his eyes refusing to meet hers. "Just go. Take Lily and leave before they get here." The air in the room crackled with tension, the storm outside roaring louder, as if the house itself sensed something was wrong. Phoenix bent down, picked up the suitcase, and clenched her jaw to keep the tears at bay. But before she could say another word, the front door creaked open again, and this time it was not Emily. Two men stepped inside, soaked from head to toe. Her brother Daniel and his longtime friend Ryan. Daniel's expression was carved from stone eyes locked directly on Mark. Ryan closed the door behind them, quietly, deliberately. Mark Daniel said, his tone even but charged. "Why is my sister crying, and why the hell are you throwing her out into a storm?" Mark's mouth opened then closed. "This is none of your business," he muttered. "Emily needs help. She has nowhere else to go." "You mean your ex-wife," Daniel snapped. "And you're kicking out your current wife and daughter to make room for her." "That sound about right." Mark looked away, jaw tight. "It's just for a little while. Emily's going through a hard time. And Phoenix isn't." Daniel took a step forward. "You've lost your damn mind." Phoenix's heart thundered in her chest. It was the first time someone had said what she could not. For so long she had pushed her discomfort down, excused the distance in Mark's eyes, the sudden silences. But now, with Daniel in the room, everything felt real and worse than she had imagined. Before she could speak, a notification buzzed on her phone. A comment from the anonymous video she had posted earlier, a cry for help wrapped in a story. She opened the app, hundreds of comments. "If you believe no woman should be pushed out of her own home for another comment, yes!" And subscribe now, because Phoenix's story is only just beginning. She looked up at Daniel, who stood now only feet from Mark, fists clenched, chest rising and falling, like a man preparing for war. And Phoenix knew whatever secrets Mark was hiding, they were about to unravel. And this time, she was not alone. ChatGPT Jean Noy. Phoenix watched, breath shallow, as the door creaked open to reveal Emily, soaked to the bone, her blonde hair matted against her pale face. Behind her stood two shivering children, 9-year-old Ethan and 7-year-old Mia, eyes wide, lips trembling. Emily's voice cracked as she stepped inside Mark. "He found us again." The room tensed instantly. Rain pooled at their feet, but no one moved. Phoenix instinctively pulled Lily closer, her heart pounding. Daniel's jaw tightened. "Who found you?" he demanded, eyes darting between Emily and Mark. Mark tried to interject, but Phoenix stepped forward, her voice trembling with fury. No more lies. Who is chasing you and why did you drag it into our home? Emily hesitated, glancing down at her children, and then whispered, Jason, my ex. He's been stalking me for months. Tonight, he showed up at my apartment with a gun. I had nowhere else to go. Phoenix turned to Mark, betrayal surging through her like wildfire. And you knew, she hissed. You put me and Lily in danger. Without saying a word, Mark's silence confirmed everything. Ryan moved toward the window tents. Daniel stepped closer to Mark, voice low and dangerous. You should have told us. You should have told Phoenix. But Mark just looked away. Outside, thunder rolled. Inside, silence throbbed. Then a loud knock. The room jumped. Another knock, louder. A voice. Emily, let me in. Everyone froze. Lily whimpered. Mommy, I'm scared. Phoenix dropped to her knees, holding her daughter, whispering, It's okay, baby. But she knew it wasn't. Mark stood still, then turned toward the door, muttering, Stay here. Daniel grabbed his arm. We all deserve answers. As the tension built, this story took a terrifying turn, and it is far from over. If you believe Phoenix deserves the truth and a safe home, comment yes, and follow for part 4. When Mark opened the door, Jason wasn't there yet, but his shadow was already creeping in. The moment Emily whispered his name, Phoenix's instincts screamed. It wasn't just about shelter anymore, it was about survival. And as the storm outside raged, so did the one inside that house. Secrets had been unleashed, and Phoenix could feel it. Nothing would ever be the same. The lights flickered once, twice, then went out completely. The room fell into an oppressive darkness, broken only by the soft sound of Lily's sobbing and the rain pounding against the windows like fists. Phoenix's pulse thundered in her ears as she held her daughter close. Mark, she whispered, her voice barely more than breath. He said nothing, frozen by the front door. And then they heard it, slow, deliberate footsteps outside. Gravel crunching beneath boots. Not the wind, not the rain. Someone was there. Jason, Emily whimpered. It's him, I know it's him. Ryan's hand slid into his jacket, pulling out a small knife. Daniel stepped toward the window, shoulders tight with readiness. Phoenix's fear turned to rage. You brought this into our home, she snapped at Mark, and you did nothing to protect us. Suddenly, a loud bang jolted the house. Lily screamed. Everyone dropped to the floor. The banging came again, then silence deep and awful. Then scratching, like fingernails dragging across the porch wood. Phoenix's mind raced. Jason was playing with them. Ryan whispered, We need to move, now. Daniel pointed toward the kitchen. Back door, my car's out there. We run. But Phoenix knew one wrong move, and Jason would be inside. They crawled across the floorboards, creaking with every breath they took. Emily gripped her kids tightly, Phoenix shielding Lily. They were almost to the door when it burst open with a deafening crash. A voice followed. Emily, Jason crooned. I know you're in here. He was inside. Daniel and Ryan leapt to intercept, weapons raised. Get the kids out, Daniel shouted. Phoenix didn't hesitate. She yanked the back door open and bolted into the rain, Lily in her arms, Mark stumbling behind with Emily and the kids. The cold hit hard, but she kept running, feet slipping on wet grass. Behind her, shouts echoed, grunts, the sound of a struggle. But she did not stop. She could not. As they reached Daniel's car, Phoenix screamed at Mark, hurry. He fumbled with the keys, finally unlocking the door. They piled in, hearts racing, soaked and terrified. She looked back once. The house, the fight, Daniel, it all blurred in the storm. But one thing was clear, Jason was no longer just Emily's nightmare. He was all of theirs. Phoenix's heart didn't stop pounding even after the car peeled away from the house. The rain lashed at the windshield, and the rhythmic beat of the wipers couldn't drown out the echoes of the fight behind them. She cradled Lily in her arms, murmuring comfort she barely believed herself. Emily sat silently in the back, her children clinging to her, all of them pale and shaking. Mark gripped the steering wheel tightly, knuckles white, his eyes fixed on the road, as if it could swallow the guilt chasing them. The car was quiet, but thick with tension, shame, and unanswered questions. Finally, Phoenix turned to him, her voice low and sharp. "Tell me everything, Mark, now." Mark's jaw clenched. He didn't look at her. "Emily called me weeks ago," he began slowly. "Said Jason was stalking her, threatening her. I told her to call the police, but she was too scared. Said he had connections, that he could find her no matter where she went." His voice cracked. "I told her, if things got bad, she could come here." Phoenix stared at him, fury simmering just below the surface. "And you didn't think your wife, your daughter, deserved to know," she hissed. "You let a dangerous man get this close to our family, and you said nothing." Mark's shoulders slumped, his voice barely audible. "I thought I could handle it." "You thought wrong," Phoenix snapped. Her gaze flicked to Emily, who sat sobbing into her hands. "And you," she said, voice trembling, "why didn't you go to the police? Why bring this to my home?" Emily looked up, eyes red. "I tried. I did. But the police said they couldn't do anything without proof. Jason, he's smart. He covers his tracks. I didn't know what else to do." Phoenix felt her anger rise, but then she looked down at Lily, asleep in her lap, breathing shallow and quick. She bit back the scream in her throat. She had to be strong for her daughter. The car turned into her mother's driveway as dawn broke. Linda ran outside, horrified. Phoenix stepped out, holding Lily tight. "We're staying here," she said, eyes cold. "And I don't know if I'll ever forgive him." If this part of Phoenix's story struck a chord with you, comment yes and subscribe for the next chapter. It's not over yet. ChatGPT Genoi. Linda's home was warm, but Phoenix felt nothing but cold inside. As her mother gently took Lily from her arms, fussing over her wet clothes and pale cheeks, Phoenix turned to Mark. The sunrise did little to soften her anger. "You brought this into our lives," she whispered, not yelling, but somehow that made it worse. "You put our child in danger, for your ex." Mark stood speechless in the driveway, his clothes soaked his shoulders, heavy with shame, but Phoenix didn't care. She walked past him without another word. An hour later, the front door creaked open again. Phoenix froze in the middle of the living room, her heart hammering. But it wasn't Jason. It was Daniel and Ryan, soaked, bruised, and visibly shaken. "He's tied up," Daniel said, his voice gruff. "Police are on the way. We'll make sure they take him this time." Phoenix rushed to her brother, throwing her arms around him with trembling relief. Ryan gave a faint nod and collapsed onto the couch. Emily stepped forward, her face tear-streaked. "Thank you. I'm so sorry, Phoenix. I didn't want to bring this to you." Phoenix turned not with forgiveness, but with resolve. "You didn't just bring him to me. You nearly got my daughter killed." Emily's lips parted as if to respond, but Phoenix had already looked away. She didn't want excuses. She wanted to feel safe again. As Linda busied herself making tea and tending to the children, Phoenix stood by the window, staring out at the gray sky. Her mind replayed everything: Mark's betrayal, the fear in Lily's eyes, Jason's voice echoing through the house. She could still feel the tremor in the floor when the front door gave in. Daniel sat beside her. "You're not alone, Phoenix. You've got me. You've always had me." She leaned against his shoulder, the first tear finally slipping down her cheek. Some wounds weren't visible. Some damage didn't heal in days. But Phoenix knew now what she'd never forget again. Trust blindly, and you risk losing everything. Love without truth was just a trap with velvet ropes. She turned back toward the kitchen, where Mark sat quietly, holding Lily's toy in his trembling hands. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The days that followed were quieter, but the silence was thick with questions. Phoenix stayed at her mother's house, watching Lily rebuild a fragile sense of normalcy with crayons and cartoons. But nothing about their life was normal anymore. Mark visited twice, once to bring clothes, once to ask for forgiveness. Each time Phoenix listened, but said little. The weight of everything he had kept from her, the danger, the secrets, the choice to prioritize someone else over their own family, was too heavy to simply excuse. And yet, despite the pain, There was still a trace of the man she had once trusted buried under guilt and regret. Meanwhile, Emily and her children were placed under police protection. Jason had been arrested, but the scars he left ran deeper than bruises. Daniel and Ryan both recovered, though Phoenix noticed the way Daniel now looked over his shoulder a little more often. Trauma had a way of marking people sometimes forever. Phoenix sat by the window one evening, Lily asleep beside her, and thought about everything that had happened. The betrayal, the chaos, the fear, it had all forced her to see the truth. She had spent too long bending herself to keep others comfortable. Now she was done shrinking. She was done sacrificing her peace for people who didn't value it. The open question lingered, would she ever take Mark back? Maybe. But not before he proved he had changed, not just with words, but with actions. And maybe not at all. Life doesn't always wrap up with a perfect bow. Sometimes the hero walks away, not to escape, but to heal. As the final scene fades, one truth remains: Phoenix rose from the ashes. And now she chooses her path with or without him.